Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And well, I'm back here talking about Pink Floyd. And here's the thing. I know I'm never going to like them as much as they're hyped, but I keep trying to listen to the album. So over the past year, I listened to Animals, which certainly had its moments, but I thought the instrumentals could get a bit too long and repetitive. I then listened to The Wall, which, despite not being the style of songwriting I'm used to, did prove really resonant. Then there was Dark Side of the Moon, which certainly has parts that I don't get the appeal of, but it also had some real highs. Brain Damage is now one of my favorite songs, and Us and Them is beautiful. I tried listening to the Syd Barrett era Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which is quite different than the later records, but maybe not as different as I want it to be. I might want to give Syd's truly solo stuff more of a taste later. The one song that really stuck with me from that record was Lucifer Sam, but everything else was either still too instrumental or too much of a novelty song. Like it felt more of a gimmick than like an actual song you want to remember and sing in your daily life. Wish You Were Here. I mean, I like the title track, but not much else. I also tried Metal, which had a few normal sounding songs, but not interesting sounding ones. And I'll have to admit, again, I don't get the appeal of Echoes, which is the masterpiece on there. Saucer Full of Secrets, more. And then there was Gumma. I think you say that and not Guma. Now that one really frustrated me. And what distinguished Guma is on the A side of the traditional vinyl, you have all the band members doing a composition together, and then on the B side, you have them each doing their own thing. And other than Roger Waters is pleasant, but sort of repetitive and a bit too subdued, Grantchester Meadows, not really into everyone just doing their own thing. And the worst manifestation of this was this meant Nick Mason, the drummer, did his own thing. And since he wasn't quite bold enough to just do a giant drum solo, he had his wife playing flute. And I mean, it was pleasant for a few minutes, but when you're listening to a creative rock band, you don't just want to hear quiet drums and flute forever. So, maybe Pink Floyd's just not my thing. I think that's quite obvious by that point, but look, I'm a compulsive guy. I'm a completionist. And no matter how many times I swing and miss, it just feels like every other music junkie not only likes, but love Pink Floyd. And top that with the fact that, Roger Waters is, again, one of these musicians from the 60s who's still out there being radical and vocal with his politics. I really want to like his art. And finally, I like looking at album covers with unique designs, and Pink Floyd are a pretty good band for that. I mean, Gumma even had a pretty cool album design. Of course, Dark Side of the Moon is classic. Wish You Were Here is memorable in its own way. And I was tempted by the album with the cow on the cover, Atom Heart Mother. And so when I saw this cow, I was intrigued. Cows, of course, are a potent symbol of motherhood due to their association with milk. So I was wondering what kind of science fiction dystopian thing is going on where, mothers are being given atomic hearts, and is the cow a symbol, or they're atomic cows? Like, what's going on? Now, if that's the reason you come to listen to the album, you're going to be disappointed, because essentially these things are all only loosely connected. The reason there's a cow on the cover is that Pink Floyd didn't like being typecast as a psychedelic band, or I guess a weird band. So they wanted something ordinary, something earthy on the cover. So they sent their photographer Storm Thurgenson out, and he photographed a cow. The cow's name is known to be Lulubelle III. The title Atom Heart Mother, meanwhile, comes from Roger Waters reading through a newspaper and finding what he thought was a memorable title. And finally, Atom Heart Mother, which is the first track on the album and is a really long instrumental piece, is broken down into little movements with memorable or kind of silly titles: Father Shout, Breasty Milk, Mother 4, Funky Dung, Mind Your Throats Please, and Reemergence. But again, there's not some great epic chapter book going on necessarily, unless you really want to play Death of the Author and put in meaning that's not there. No, the band members just had to come up with names for the different parts of what is really one long continuous piece, because that would mean they would get more royalties. You get paid less if you only have one song on the album, or at least that was a thing then. So if you're intrigued by this album because you're intrigued by the concept of the Atom Heart mother and possibly literally the Atom Heart cow, you're going to be disappointed. The title track is a long instrumental piece. It's one that apparently David Gilmour, I've seen this, and apparently Roger Waters too, now view as kind of trash, though a lot of fans still like it. To me, it sounds, no worse than any of their other long instrumental pieces. If anything, maybe a bit less repetitive. I don't see why, you would like Echoes or like Dogs and not like this one. The one thing I could think of is that a major in the song is Ron Geeson, who wrote all the orchestral parts. So it's possible the parts that are truly Pink Floyd, the guitar, the bass, the keyboards, the drums, maybe aren't actually that interesting. Maybe that's what Waters and Gilmour are saying is trash. And they don't feel like they deserve credit for the orchestral part because Ron Geeson isn't part of Pink Floyd. And so even though this the opening track does have a lot of beautiful orchestral choral moments, they just don't really identify with that. That said, the reason I wanted to talk about Atom Heart Mother is not, I guess, the bulk of the album, because you have this really long opening track, Atom Heart Mother, and then you have a pretty long concluding track called Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which is also broken into parts: Rise and Shine, Sunny Side Up, and Morning Glory. And it's basically just sounds of someone making breakfast mixed in with some more psychedelic side effects. So bulk of the album, Pink Floyd, not at all what I'm into. But what I do like is that you have 3 songs in the middle of the album. Like with Ummagumma, the idea is that these 3 songs would be really particular to individual members of the band. So for better or for worse, Nick Mason didn't get his song this time, but there is a Roger Waters song, a Richard Wright song, and a David Gilmour song. And I thought they were all pretty good. And I thought, wow, if they can write songs like these, why did we never get a Pink Floyd album that was just songs like these? I guess it's not what most Pink Floyd fans would want, but it's what I'd really want. So let's start with Roger Waters' song, If. If is just a nice song musically. I find the sound impressive how mostly it's just a very sparse acoustic guitar. Roger Waters is trying to keep it simple and beautiful, yet occasionally you get an electric guitar solo or a piano solo, and despite being this drastically bigger sound, it's just produced perfectly. It layers over so nicely. As for the lyrical content of the song, it just strikes this perfect balance between memorable simplicity, but not being too simple. Even as Waters repeats the frame, if I were, pretty much at the beginning of every line, which could be the downside of the song, some of the if I were's are clearly more important than others. Some might just be throwaway lines, some are clearly serious, and that combined with the melody gives some a real effect. So one of the most memorable of these if I lines is, if I go insane, please don't put wires in my brain. And it's hard for me not to interpret that line as being one of the many Pink Floyd thinking about the fact that they have this band member at the beginning, Syd Barrett, who is such a charismatic, inspired person, but mental health issues made him impossible to work with. And that underlying feeling of guilt that inspired songs like Brain Damage, I Wish You Were Here, possibly, though not necessarily, Comfortably Numb. And so on that point, an even more intriguing line is, if I were a good man, I'd understand the spaces between friends. So it's if Roger Waters is implying he's guilty for compartmentalizing the insane, the lunatic Barrett from normal himself. He'd like to think that, maybe if we were a more tolerant, intelligent, perfect people, that these differences in brain chemistry wouldn't lead to friendships falling apart, and he would be able to have a completely normal relationship with Barrett despite these cognitive disabilities. Next, we get Richard Wright's song, Summer of '68, which is really musically remarkable. It sounds like something Brian Wilson would have composed. It starts out as a piano-based tune, and then eventually moves to symphonic orchestration, and then you get some Beach Boys-like harmonies and a constantly evolving melody. Wright, like all the guys on this album, has a very quiet voice, which maybe explains why they gravitated more towards instrumental music, but it's a very expressive voice, wonderfully so. It sort of reminds me of Cat Stevens at his most emotional. Another thing I found fascinating with this song, so here in the booklet are the lyrics to If. Kind of looks like standard lyric on a page. Look at Summer of '68. These do not look like standard lyric on a page. They look like paragraphs. So Richard Wright has managed to write these long lines that nonetheless come out of his mouth so melodically. Now, when I was looking into these songs, there's not very much writing about them because I think most people think the heart of the album is, the 20-something minute track called Atom Heart Mother, when for me, the really interesting thing is these compositions. So all I really heard said about Summer of '68 was that it was a song about a groupie. And just describing it as that, it feels dismissive. It misses the nuance of the song. If you're calling a sexual partner a groupie, it comes with a kind of dismissive connotation that it's shallow sex. It's sex with someone who admires you because you're a cool rock star. Yet when you look at the lyrics to this song, it's clear that Wright is pining for a deeper connection, just like Waters is pining for a deeper connection with Syd Barrett and others in If. So in this song, Richard Wright sings, "Perhaps you'd care to state exactly how you feel." He says, "We said goodbye before we said hello," or take this line, "Not a single word was said. The night still hid our fears. Occasionally, you showed a smile." This song is not just about a groupie. It's a self-criticism of the superficiality of the rock and roll sex world, of viewing someone, whether they identify that way or not, primarily as a groupie. So it's a fantastic musical composition, and there's some real soul searching in the songs as well. Now, finally, we get to David Gilmour's Fat Old Son. So like Richard Wright, David Gilmour has a soft voice, though unlike Richard Wright's mournful, soft voice, Gilmour is more of a spacey, hippie kind of singer. In fact, they do this cool thing in the last verse where Gilmour's voice gets so spacey, it just fades behind his guitar solo. And I know I've spent this video complaining about how Pink Floyd instrumentals can go on too long. But in this case, David Gilmour has sung enough lyrics that it's not like he's running away from lyrics again and just fleeing to the more comfortable instrumental. No, he's said his part with his lyrics, and now he's taking his bow. As for the song, Fat Old Song, it's not hard to hear it as the true title track for this record, this pastoral cow record, because it's a song about simulating the senses, not through some weird psychedelic trip like on a saucer full of secrets, just by appreciating the sounds of nature around you. It's Pink Floyd's Back to Earth album, Back to the Cow, Back to the Grass. So in conclusion, Pink Floyd's popularity continues to confound me for the same reason I've held all along. No other instrumental experimental group can hold a candle to their mainstreamness and their centrality in the rock world. And for the upkeep time, this is not a criticism of them. Obviously, the best musicians in the world are classical musicians and jazz musicians, and they just play long instrumental pieces. I guess Pink Floyd confuses me because I don't get why they're not considered more part of that category, but they're considered just as mainstream and cool and rock and roll as the Beatles and the Stones. I think they should be seen as a high art things, yet they're this commercial mass selling thing you just find in ordinary record stores. But if you're like me, if you want to listen to Floyd, but your rock tastes are a bit more conventional, you like your folk rock, then Atom Heart Mother may be one of the better choices for you. And I say that with a huge caveat because, again, most of the album is split between the two instrumental songs, the opening track of Atom Heart Mother and the closing track of Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast. But you also get this run of 3 pretty good folk rock songs showing a rarely seen side of Roger Waters, Richard Wright, and David Gilmour in If, Summer of '68, and Fat Old Son. And that's just a rarity amongst Pink Floyd. And I was grateful that this album, where I love the cover, it gave me a unique experience. So I think I'm done talking about Pink Floyd records for now. Stay in some safer territory, but had a lot of fun doing this. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.